This is the BreadWinner Podcast, hosted by entrepreneur, influencer, and sales wolf, Tyler Harris, bringing you the insights from the most successful forward-thinking entrepreneurs and influencers, so that you can rise to the top and make more dough.
Now, let's get into the show.
All right, what's up, everybody? This is Tyler Harris. I'm your host of the BreadWinner Podcast. Thank you for being here. Also, thank you to Mr. Jonathan Parker, who is here live in the flesh, in the studio here in Greenville, South Carolina. Excited to bring him on here in just a second. But I'm just going to go ahead and do this like a spoiler alert on the front end. Jonathan is just coming off of a TedX talk. He's excited about it. I'm excited to hear about it. But the nature of his talk is what will end up being the kind of the framework of this conversation. It sounds even funny just to say. Once you hear what it is, why that's funny. But man, thank you so much for being here. Some of you saw him on the daily vlog, the Daily Bread. We're going to go a little bit more in depth on that conversation on conversations. So, man, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Tell everybody a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and what your focus is right now.
Yeah, again, thank you so much for having me on. Huge fan of the Daily Bread, the podcast, the vlog, the Facebook, the Instagram. Every chance I can see Tyler and TJ running around. My name is Jonathan Parker. I grew up in New England, a small little town called Newington, right outside of Hartford. So we've flown into Hartford, small little town there. Lived in one house, went to one church, pretty much had one job, so pretty consistent or boring, depending on however you want to view that. But growing up was awesome. I had awesome parents, great siblings. My sister's 12 years older than I am. My brother's 11 years older than I am. So I grew up with like 3 sets of parents, but awesome family. Love them. My parents are some of my best friends. They actually flew down for the TEDx talk, which was so cool. That's awesome. First time my dad got to see me do a speech and talk like that. That's huge. So cool. So awesome family experience, but something that just characterized my life was I was sick for a lot of it. And seizures when I was a baby, just due to spikes in fever, which made it hard for me to speak. And I had a lot of double ear infections. And actually, this is really cool. My mom, who's probably going to listen to this, she's like, why are you talking about me? My mom's starting to lose her hearing, and she has hearing aids on, and it's starting to get a little worse. And the doctor started telling her that technology has really started to be able to understand how we hear. And you actually, and she's telling me all of this, right? Because, we didn't know, we knew I had seizures, and we knew it was hard for me to hear, and we know I didn't speak like clearly until it was almost between 4 and 5. That actually your ears don't hear, your brain hears. And your brain's consistently looking for sound. But because I was having the seizures, my brain was spiking, and because I had such massive double ear infections, the sound waves weren't getting through, and the brain was almost scrambled.
Wow.
Like looking for sound.
Yeah.
So, you have this, and this all happened before I was, 5 years old, right? And then I had severe allergies, severe asthma, massive, and that was in elementary and middle school, and then high school I developed massive ulcers in my stomach. Oh, wow. And then in college, my liver began to fail. Jeez. Just due to these issues. So, I had this history of just being sick for a long time.
In college, my liver began to fail too, but that was self-induced.
That was self-induced. And see, that was before I even enjoyed a beer, right? My liver was failing on me before any of that. And I was just sick for so many times. And I still played sports. Like, my dad never allowed being sick to be an excuse. He was always understanding. Yeah. But it was never used as an excuse. So, I started working when I was 14, working on the jobs. Yet I would tire fast. My bodies can handle it. But the one thing I could always do and always love to do was talk. But I think I took that for granted because my mom had to work so hard with me when I wasn't able to speak well. Yep. And this was before, schools had therapists and things like that. So the mere fact that I speak well today and that people pay me to speak and all that, so much credit goes to my mom and my dad, who just never gave up, never was satisfied with a doctor who said, well, he'll probably never do. I think my parents said, your kids will never do as like a dare. Like, oh, cool. So let's just overcome that. And that was probably for all their kids, not just me. So the being sick, it doesn't characterize my life, but it's part of my life.
Sure.
And there are things that are part of your story just for you as well, that they're part of your story and they're a big part of your story, but they're not the characteristic of your story. It's not the main theme, but it's this theme that led me to really value communicating in front of people. Because even when you're sick, you can talk. Even when you're not feeling well or not strong enough to run up and down the basketball court, you can still stand behind a podium. You can still stand up and talk to people. And I realized that people responded to hearing me speak. And really that primarily started happening in churches. I would preach for church or give Bible studies. But then after I got married to my beautiful wife, Jessica, I started doing a lot of things in the community that really pushed me to speak in more public settings, non-church settings, on all sorts of issues. And 3.5 years ago, I was in a rough place. I was almost 30, and I was doing a job I loved, but I felt that I was lacking purpose, lacking drive at times. And I couldn't identify it, so you just end up whining and complaining, and everyone else is the problem. You're fine if everyone else would just get on board. And I'm just at this place, and Jessica and I get to go away to a really nice hotel for a conference, and it was at this conference where I just had a transformational moment, and a moment with this speaker, and he just called me out. I spent 30, 45 minutes just whining, complaining, telling him how bad life was for a 29-year-old, and he just cuts me off in the middle of my sentence towards the end, and he just says, how many years are you going to waste waiting for permission to do what you already know you should be doing? And something you have said repeatedly since the year, 2.5, almost 2 years I've been listening to you, like, how many years are you going to wait for permission to do what you know you're supposed to do? And it was there looking back. That's what I was doing. I was waiting for permission to be something that I thought people wanted, but the people closest to me just wanted me to be me.
Yeah.
I mean, the people who really, truly cared about me and value me, and people who value you, they want you to be you.
Yep.
They're not looking for you to be somebody else.
Sure.
So I drove out of that hotel, and I said, I'm going to start 2 things. I'm not waiting for permission on 2 things. I'm going to start something called Gospel on Tap, and I'm going to start studying the conversation. And those two overlap a little bit. And it's been a 3.5 year journey developing these two organizations company. One's a company now, and one's a nonprofit. And this idea of conversation, that the words that come out of your mouth, the words that you use paint a picture. And that every one of us is an artist. Yeah. We're all artists. And the words that paint this picture is our vocal art. It's invisible. It can't be seen, but it is our vocal art. And it not only captures the subject being discussed, but it's also a direct reflection of the person. And in a world who is just careless with their words, it's the equivalent of an artist who's careless with their paint or their poetry or their clay or their food. They're careless, they're reckless. They just assume that you should understand it. In a world like that, true vocal artists who think and are intentional with their words are few. So you challenge the status quo by being intentional and taking value in what other people devalue, and that is the words in which they use. And now the art of the conversation has grown to businesses, to speaking, and then a dream of mine standing in that red circle, giving a TEDx talk was awesome.
So I want to take this maybe a little bit of a different route based on something that you just said and ask you a question. So when you talked about being intentional with your words, have you read the 4 Agreements?
No. 4 Agreements?
The 4 Agreements. I think it's Don Ruiz, something like that. But 4 Agreements, one of those agreements is being impeccable with your words. Is it right here? It's got it right here. Yeah, the 4 Agreements, Don Miguel Ruiz. This is a definite one that you want to read. But one of those agreements is to be impeccable with your word. Yeah, it's the first agreement. Be impeccable with your words. And the interesting thing I wanted to ask you about that, and just that mentality, is it's the words that you say to yourself. So when you talk about being intentional with your words, what that book referenced is all this talk, this internal dialogue, is just as important, if not more important, than your external dialogue that you're having with other people. So maybe talk about that a little bit, because I can imagine, especially when people are either on the verge or in the process of some type of transformation,
Right.
their dialogue with themselves is critical during those fragile periods of time. So maybe talk about that a little bit, because that may be a little bit of a different spin on your art of the conversation that people don't normally talk about.
Yeah, and that you're exactly right. It's a great question, and it's something I don't get to talk much about, because we're always, the majority of people who want to talk about art of the conversation want to talk about like public one-on-one conversation. Yet there's this part of conversation that stems from that, and that's what I call the private gallery. So I call conversations vocal art, right?
Yeah.
So most people don't remember you. They remember the art that was created with you. And it's like a gallery they have.
Yeah.
So every conversation you and I have had, there's an imaginary gallery that when we're getting ready to see one another again, we kind of walk through and remember these conversations.
That makes sense.
And it's a gallery, yet that's the public gallery. It's the gallery you share with people. Yet there's this private gallery that is vitally important and crucial and critical to what you do publicly. Because you cannot do publicly what is not supported privately.
Wow.
You can't develop great, remarkable public vocal art if your private work does not support that. So if you wake up every morning and you start the day by creating vocal art with yourself, your private gallery that only you see, by saying things like, I'm a failure, I'm useless, I'm worthless, I can't. If your private vocal art is belittling and dismissive of you as a person, then you're only going to create things like that publicly. And you may be able to fake it for a little bit, dial it in for a little bit, but that won't be sustained. And so when we talk about these intentional words with yourself, the private gallery, you have a private gallery that you run through every day. I was up early again this morning for probably 4:45, getting ready to do some training and then getting ready for the podcast. And I got up and I was tired. Who's not, right? It was my wife's birthday last night. Up a little later than normal. I got up at 4:45 and I said, I'm tired. First words out of my mouth when I walked in the bathroom and closed the door was, I'm tired. And then I switched it. And I said, but I'm awake.
Yeah. That's good.
I'm awake. And there's stuff to be done. And I could sit, on the bathtub, I don't know, the whatever wall. And I could sit there and be tired and just scroll through my phone, talk about, well, no one else is up, or, why am I up so early? I could say, I'm awake, let's get to work. And so, like, my private gallery generally starts every morning with, I'm tired, but let's get to work. And you have these things that you need to tell yourself in order to create remarkable vocal art. So this private gallery, people want to ignore, especially men. Especially men. In the world of comparison and judging your worst day by everyone else's highlight reel, just everything's compared. You continue to tell yourself you don't measure up, you don't measure up, you don't measure up, you don't measure up. And well, of course, then you're not going to produce amazing vocal art out here. And if you're careless personally, you're going to be careless out there. So that private gallery, those words you tell yourself is vitally important to the health.
So how does that look like? How does the transformation or the change in that private gallery, like what does that look like? Because someone can start today and change the words that they're having, the conversations that they're having with themselves. Right. And I would think it would change very quickly. That all of a sudden, if you take down the art on the wall,
right, exactly,
and you put up new pieces that are beautiful and that tell this positive story, then I would think that would very quickly change everything around you.
No doubt. So what I had to do, 3.5 years ago, and I didn't know this 3.5 years ago, it was a journey. Most things worth doing are worth the journey to get there. So I didn't know all this right off the bat. So I'm glad I can now share it with people so that they're wondering, hey, where do I start? Hey, cool, start here. I took out a piece of paper, very much like one right in front of me, and I wrote down authentically, truly, no holds barred with myself, what I thought of myself. I just wrote it down. And, and it was funny and dorky. Like, I'm bald. I still have acne. I was 30. All of this stuff, right? But you have to get down, you have to go deep, right? So I'm saying you got to write down 50 things, 75 things, because you can pretend for the first 10 maybe. And I don't remember everything I wrote down, but I got down to I'm insecure. I'm trying to please people. I don't think I'm being valued for what I ought. I mean, just brought it down and just wrote it down.
Yeah.
I'm fearful. Some of them were words. And I just wrote it down, and I looked at myself, in essence, as a mirror, and said, is this who I want to be? Because if this is how I see myself, I can only masquerade for so long. And that's why my walkout song, I had a walkout song, which anytime you get a chance to have a walkout song,
we're going to create it just in the office.
I'm telling you, the walkout song, you just should have it. It's amazing. My walkout song was Michael Jackson's Man in the Mirror.
Nice.
If you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and make the change. I'm starting with the man in the mirror. So, one, just write it all down. And then look at yourself in the mirror or a physical mirror and go, I don't want to be this person. I don't want to be this guy. For the women, I don't want to be this woman. And then you just pick one. And you start, what's making me afraid? And then you name your fears. What's making me insecure? You name your insecurities. You name them for yourself. You dig a little deep. You do some self-work. And then you start talking to people about them. And you start sharing those. And it's that paradox of vulnerability, right? You think when you display weakness and vulnerability that people are going to think you are weak. But actually they're going to go, you get it too? So when you start working on that, and then go one for one. If you're afraid of disappointing people, figure out what do you need to do to get over that one. Like if you're going to write down the piece you don't like, write down what you do like. So when you start replacing it like that, and you start seeing yourself differently, you become comfortable in your own skin. And just being comfortable in your own skin allows you to produce authentic, truly authentic work. Rather than you creating work that you think people are going to like.
And the interesting thing there, too, it's not like you're becoming some inauthentic version of you.
Right.
You're just becoming a better version of you. You're becoming the version of you that you're living up to the potential you. Because I think a lot of people could look at that and they could say, well, if I list out all these things that I am or that I think about myself now, and then I kind of have this other list of where I want to be, well, who I want to be versus who I am, like those are two different people. But no, it's the exact same person. Which is extremely interesting. You mentioned this. What was the way you said it? You said anything worth doing was worth doing.
Was worth the process?
Was worth the process. It was interesting. We met with a guy, I believe this was Tom Shea. He's like a 23-year Navy SEAL veteran, like an incredible human being. But their phrase was, anything worth doing is worth overdoing.
Oh, nice.
Which I thought was extremely interesting, because you usually think is worth doing right. That's like the automatic. But he said, no, it's worth overdoing. And so it talked about like the lengths at which you go through to make these changes. Like if it's worth doing, and that certainly is worth doing, then it's worth overdoing it. Right. It's almost like taking it to extremes. Like the just activity of writing these things out, like that to the average person would seem like an extreme thing to go through. Right. But again, anything worth doing is worth overdoing it, and especially when it's something that's so important.
Right.
I mean, people I don't think grasp just how important your internal dialogue really is. Right. And even just little things like using words like always and never. Like, like I'm always late. Like you're running late to the office. Oh, I'm always late. Well, then you're just going to continue to be always late.
Always
like
late.
that's because that's who you are. You're the guy that's always late. Or I never do this right. Like, well, then you're never going to. And it's so funny, and I'm sure you've experienced this with people. Like when you start to get even the smallest grasp of this internal dialogue, and I refer to all of this as really law of attraction and attracting what you want. And when you start to hear things come out of other people's mouths, like, "Oh, today's going to be the worst day," or "Man, tomorrow's going to be the busiest, craziest day," I'm like, "Because you just manifested that. Like you just said tomorrow's going to be the worst day. How's tomorrow going to be great? Like you have no choice.
It's all self-fulfilling prophecies that you almost subconsciously try to make sure comes true.
Yeah, like you sabotage yourself on purpose so that what you said then plays out. Like, and it makes you somehow feel like, well, I knew it was going to happen.
Yeah, I knew I'd have a bad attitude and a terrible day. So
do you take some of that in that language that you're using and do you flip some of that? Like instead of saying that I'm insecure. Do you do a lot of like affirmation type, like the opposite of those things? Like I'm 100% secure, because it sounded like a lot of yours was more like, here's where I am now. Let's break that down. But is there also an element of that is like preaching the opposite? Like affirming the opposite? Like that's actually, no, I'm actually extremely secure.
Right.
Like those type things?
Yeah. So the word affirmation is a perfect word for it, because we also have this idea in our mind that we don't want to be prideful. Yet we don't want to be prideful, yet we're so prideful when we say we don't want to be prideful. Right? I'm so humble, I'll let you know I'm humble. Like, it's like just not
the hashtag humble brag.
Humble brag. So I like the word affirmation, right? Sounds like, oh, you shouldn't affirmation, right, yourself. But then you got to think about where that word, the core of that word is affirm. The core of that word affirm is these are affirm. To affirm something is to say these are true. These are true. So this isn't everybody's journey, but I really love Jesus. I follow him, and I looked at what Jesus first said was true of me. Like, this is what Jesus says is true of me. Okay, so I believe he's the Son of God. I believe he's my Savior. And he said these things are true of me. Who am I to argue with that?
Agreed.
So one, I just looked to a power higher than me and said, this is what he says is true of me. So part of it was believing what I could not see to be true.
Which is faith.
So believing in faith, these things are true. Because somebody else said them about me, and he holds them true. The other piece is I also had to affirm who I was.
Yeah.
I'm loud. I'm passionate. I kind of talk with my hands. I'm always slightly over the top. And my wife says living with me is kind of like being on a roller coaster that never has a dip. It's just high all the time. Yeah. But my lows are really low. Yeah. Right? I'm passionate all the way. So part of the affirm is like, this is what's true of me. And if it needed to be improved, then it needed to be improved. Yeah. But if it was part of my DNA, part of my wiring, part of my makeup, part of what I can give to this world, I didn't want to change it. I wanted to be better.
And that's big. That's important. It's because self-awareness. You know, it's this huge buzzword these days. But I think a lot of people look at that in the wrong way. So when you're trying to figure out who you are, like it's your most raw, like who Tyler Harris is. Right. What a lot of people will do with that information, once they figure out, if they can figure it out, is they'll see all the weaknesses, right, and they attack those first. Okay, I'm bad at this. Okay, let me get good at that. Right. Well, maybe you're bad at that for a reason. Maybe that's not your thing. Right. Maybe all those things that you're good at, you just need to triple down on those. Right. That's the way I look at self-awareness is just that. Like, it's figuring out the stuff that you're bad at. That's great. But it's figuring out the ones that you're good at and just going all in on those and delegating the rest. Right. Because just like what you're saying, like all that list of things about yourself, there's some of those things that you don't need to fix because that's what makes you you. And if the other areas that you can improve, those other areas that you can go all in on, it's almost like those other little things. That's just like your twist on it. Like, it's like your, from your backstory, it's just like the way your narrative will play out in that very unique way because of those things. But I think the thing people miss so much is it's about celebrating your strengths. This whole journey, self-awareness, and really figuring out who you are, it's about celebrating your strengths, not comparing your weaknesses. Right. Like when whether it's doing profile assessments or different actual tests and different things that you can do, it's not about comparing me and TJ's results or me and your results. It's about figuring out and celebrating what makes me me. Right. And I think so many people get caught up in the trying to fix things when they figure out who they are. No, it's just who you are. Exactly. So it doesn't necessarily mean anything needs to be fixed. Nothing may need to be fixed. Yeah. What actually might need to be fixed is just your perspective. Yeah. True. Because we people have a tendency to view our weakness against somebody's strength. Yeah. So I was talking to somebody after the TedX talk, and they said, "Oh, I just wish I could talk like you." And I said, "Hey, that's really kind, but please don't, because that's not talk like you're supposed. If you want to get better at talking, I'm all for that. But don't talk like me." So one of the words I use is prescribed authenticity.
that we're not really authentic. We take on an authenticity that allows us to be accepted, or allows us to be in a group, or allows us to look like somebody or stand out. And because it's prescribed authenticity, it's not us. Literature, right? That's called plagiarism. Art called forgery. And this idea of comparing your weakness to someone's strength and saying, well, I'm just going to pretend to be that guy, is prescribed authenticity. So compare strength to strength.
That's true.
And say, he's really good at this, but I'm really good at this. Yep. And part of community, part of working together in team, part of that, 5 people circle of influence is hang out with people who compliment you, not with, hey, you're awesome, but compliment where you're weak, they're strong, and what a gift you can give to your circle of friends.
Absolutely.
To be so connected with friends and go, hey, listen, I know this isn't your thing, but it's mine, and I got you. And that's so key, that when we realize who we are and what we offer the world, sometimes they're gifts, sometimes there's opportunities, but at the end of the day, it's us. And the world doesn't need another anyone. It needs who we are and the art we create.
It's almost like, in the way you said that prescribed authenticity, it's almost as though authenticity actually doesn't really exist. I mean, because it's coming from some lens that you're bringing that to the world. But that's probably why those that are the most authentic, it's almost shocking. Oh, yeah. Because they're so unique and they're so different. Like, you can think of different people that just enter your mind as like someone that's really authentic. And it's probably someone that's like a little bit out there, like a little bit off the wall, because like that's them. Exactly. Like, TJ's very authentic. Yeah. Because he's passionate about the things that he talks about. You're very authentic. Like, but there's so often there's these guards you put up that, like, I'll be authentic to that line, right, and to this line, let me box myself in based on the people that are around me or the environment that I'm in. But that's interesting. It's like almost like, where is their actual true authenticity or the freedom to be 100% you? Because you're always concerned about how other people are going to receive that message or view you. That's interesting.
I had a guy stop me after the talk, and he said, when you got to the prescribed authenticity point, he said, something that's just been really bothering me finally became clear. He said, this word authenticity has been thrown around a lot. So he's like, I've been reading all these books on how to be authentic and how to be authentic and how to be authentic. And he said, it never settled right. There was always something that like threw me off. And he's like, I didn't know what it was until I realized that book didn't want me to be authentic. It wanted me to be their way of authentic. And he said, so I've read 3 or 4, but now I think I could go back to those books, take what is right for me, and live that out. And that's just how it is. So I'm not telling you not to read books on how to be authentic. Like, I've read several. But the idea is authenticity is not a Lego set. Yeah, that's true. I mean, it should be more of a mosaic than a solid color. Yeah. There should be parts of you that make no sense to anyone but you. And you should be a little out there. Because if you're not a little out there, then you're boxed in with everybody else.
So how old were you when you began to realize that communication, conversation was something that was different, special with you versus the people that you had around you? Like, there was a moment, I'm assuming, that you were just like, something's different about the way I converse with others, or something's different about the connections I'm able to create with others. Were you still in high school, middle school? Were you older?
That's a great question. So thinking out loud, kind of walking it out. Yeah. I think my parents, and I always had friends and peers and mentors in the broad sense, tell me, oh, you're good at communicating, you're a good communicator. And I believed them, right? I definitely believed them. But sometimes we underestimate our gift. Sure. Underestimate our gifting, and our talents, in essence. So I knew I had heard for a long time, oh, you're good at communicating, you're good at preaching, you're good at talking. But I never allowed that to like sink in. I did what we just talked about. I'm good at that, but I'm bad at this. Yeah, right? I'm good at that, but I'm bad at this. Yeah. And I would say that over the last 3 years, so 30, over the last 3 years, is when I realized something happens when I talk, when I speak. That became pretty...
Unintentionally.
Yes, unintentionally. At that time, unintentionally, I was in this peer group. It was a clergy cohort of a bunch of clergy from a bunch of different varieties of religion, and most of them were strangers to me, so they didn't know any of my journey outside of what I shared. Okay. And two people specifically, Scott and Marlanda, they just said, "You need to speak every opportunity you get. You have to speak every opportunity you get." And they just continued to gently prod me to speak. Now, other people were doing that as well. But these people knew more of my story. They knew more of my background. They had heard me speak before. Yeah. These folks had only ever heard me in a small group setting. They're like, no, you need to speak. Something happens when you speak. You need to speak. You need to speak.
That's interesting.
So I think not my whole life, right? But my memory life, people always said I was good at it. But I would say that over the last 3+ years is when I really looked at it. I said, man, there's something different. And I do believe that it is God-given as a gift, but it's also a talent and a skill that I had to develop. Yeah. Just God gives gifts and talents and skills, but it doesn't mean you don't get to work. And you put in, I told one young kid, he was a high school student, came to TedX with I think it was his dad, which I was like, great, skip school to come to this. It's better education. And they asked me, like, what's one piece of advice you would give to my son? And I said, take every opportunity you get to speak. Yeah. Develop content whenever you get to develop content. I said, I remember when I was an adult, like, starting this, like, the first couple people I would go speak to would be, like, 2 people in the room. And they were only there because they wanted to support me. You know, they could care less what I said. And I was like, just practice. Yeah. Memorize what you can. Outline. Write. Consider. Be open to feedback. So I would really say, probably over the last 3.5 years, when I really took a hard look and said, man, something happens. And then something else happened in that moment, if I can share this. When I realized something happened, that it mattered, that it offered impact and influence, I started to talk about a lot less so that I could talk about very few things passionately. Okay. So when you realize that words that come out of your mouth matter to people, you have to start... It's powerful. And you have to start asking yourself, does it matter enough to me to have an opinion on it?
That's interesting.
And I had to start trimming back what I had an opinion on. Now, did that mean I stopped having an opinion? No, of course. Everyone has opinions on everything. I have an opinion on the weather. I have no control over it, but I have an opinion on it. But I don't voice it because there are things that I don't understand. There are things that I don't want to be an expert on or known as the guy that has an opinion on it. I want my words and my content and my speech and my talk, when people ask for it, to matter. And I want to choose what matters from my perspective and in my value system. Yeah. So I actually, when I realized this was happening, I began to talk less.
That's interesting.
But talk more intentionally.
It's almost like you understood at that moment that you had a power that could be used for good or bad. And not necessarily bad, but that it could be used in ways that weren't intended. Right. Which is interesting. A lot of people I've been listening to recently have had that same feeling about the law of attraction. They're like, it's so real for me in this visualization and things coming to fruition that, like, I have to be careful because I can manifest things that I did not intend to or would not have wanted to. Literally not just the good stuff. Like, I can bring about the bad stuff as well. But that's extremely aware to be able to realize that. So fear of public speaking, biggest fear, right? I mean, like, higher than death. Okay. You talked about the high school kid. Go talk. Go get out there. What does it do for just the average human being that has no aspirations to ever speak on TEDx, right, or give big presentations or seminars, or that's not their thing, but just what does it do to human beings to become better speakers and become better communicators just in their everyday life?
And this is where you go back to the idea that every one of us is an artist. Yeah. And every one of us creates artwork every time we talk. Yeah. So even if you have I want to be on the big stage speaking aspirations, you're on a stage every time your word's open. And public speaking and speaking in front of people, those are the stories people share at your funeral. That's true. The artwork is what's shared at your funeral. The words that came out of your mouth and then the corresponding actions. That's what they talk about. So you are an artist. You create artwork every time you open your mouth, and people remember your artwork. It is not forgotten. So just based on those three realities alone,
Important.
everyone should be paying attention to the words that come out of their mouth, whether you type them on a screen or verbalize them. So for the person who's like, well, it doesn't matter, I don't talk to too many people. If you talk to one person, that's enough.
Yeah.
And if you have a spouse or significant other, if you have kids or nieces or nephew, or you have people who follow you, even if it's one person, I mean, let's not belittle. One other person chose to follow you and be influenced by you. What an honor, what a gift. That alone should cause you to want to really think about the words that come out of your mouth, the conversations which you have. And by no means am I perfect in this, right? Maybe next podcast you should interview my wife and like play this back and go, any rebuttal? But we're not perfect at it.
Yep.
But that's why you have to keep doing it. You know, one of the things that is interesting is we look at paintings like the Mona Lisa and the Sistine Chapel and the Statue of David, or we love the Beatles songs, and we look at all of these amazing pieces of art, and we forget that they had to move on and do another one. So what we put in museums and build monuments to and pay hundreds of dollars and fly all across the world to see the Statue of Adam or Statue of David, you have to go and do another piece of art.
Yeah.
So there's also this part where you create and you have one great conversation. The next time you open your mouth, you got to have another one. The next time you open it, you got to have another one. You just don't get to say, look, I talked to Tyler really well today for 2.5 hours, so the rest of them don't matter.
Yeah.
You can't do that. So when you believe because you are, and when you accept because you are an artist, and that the words coming out of your mouth paint a picture that reflects you, you'll be much more thoughtful about the words you use and the conversations that you have.
It's very true. One of my favorite phrases to use, and as sad as it sounds, we use it sometimes as a sales tactic with life insurance, but it doesn't make it any less true. And it's this phrase of everyone gets to choose the legacy that they leave behind. Everyone gets to choose. And as you're speaking, it's just so apparent to me that your words are like, it's like the most simplistic form of that.
Right.
Like if you know that the conversation that you're having with another human, that is how you were going to be remembered by that person, are these random stints of communication that they have with you over time, that that's the legacy that you're leaving behind for that human being.
Right.
And then who they tell about you, and who they tell about you, and who they tell about you. And so, I mean, it's incredibly important.
Yeah.
Every conversation that you have. It's almost like overwhelming when I think about it.
Exactly.
You're just like, holy crap, like I didn't realize it that like to that extent. Man, that's huge.
So
it's good for you.
Oh, it's fun
because it's important.
It's important. I will want everybody to know. Someone says, "Who needs art of the conversation?"
Everyone. That's
so
true.
You know that phrase, "leaving a legacy." It's always been interesting to me. Like, what legacy am I leaving? And I don't remember if I read it somewhere, heard it somewhere, or if it was just one of my journal entries, but I actually changed one of the words. Not that I think it's a wrong phrase.
Sure.
But I've started saying, what legacy do I want to give? Because leave felt passive.
Yep, that's true.
If I leave something, well, I just
you left it behind. Yeah.
But what do I want to give as a legacy? Like I'm when I leave this earth, I want to be able to say I gave this world something. I gave this world something that it needed, didn't have. I wanted to put whatever size dent I could in it, and I wanted to give it something. So now all of a sudden, what I do becomes a gift that I want to live beyond me. It's a line in the Macklemore song. I'm not going to try to rap. That's your field. But it's I heard you die twice. Once when you leave this earth, and the last time someone mentions your name.
Wow.
And the rest of the song is like, I'm not doing stuff for fame. I'm literally trying to do something here. And there's a part of me that says, I want people to mention my name for a long time, not so that I get glory and that people build a statue of me, but that what I gave, the legacy I gave, again, it's just from my brain. What I left here mattered enough for it to impact a generation to a generation.
That's powerful. You know, it's interesting. I'm thinking back to the first time that you and I met. I was at Starbucks right down the road from here. And that's before I knew any of this art of conversation, and that was anywhere within your focus. But I remember leaving that conversation. I'm trying to like put myself back in that place, but I can remember thinking distinctly how underwhelming my conversation skills were. Like, I remember feeling like, holy cow, like he just like was in the conversation. I felt like I was extremely important. I felt like he was genuinely interested in the things that he was asking about. And it honestly, it made me a little bit uncomfortable to be like, God, I do not treat other people the same way. Like, it was that black and white for me, which obviously goes to show on how much you've worked and how much time and effort has gone into creating that. Because that's the very first time we'd ever met. Like, and just to instantly, for someone to be able to feel like that much, like, it's as though I went to play tennis with Andre Agassi. Like, that type of like feeling of like, holy cow, like I am not, I don't need to talk to anybody for a little while. Like, I need to figure this stuff out, but in a good way. Like, it was just like, holy cow, that was an incredible conversation. And I think it's something that until people have that type of experience, may not have any idea how terrible they are with other people. Like, may not have any idea that when they open their mouth, they just talk about themselves, or they just talk about problems, or they just like. I was having breakfast at that, actually coffee at that same Starbucks a couple weeks ago with a guy, and we had never really sat down for coffee together. It was just more of just like in passing conversation. And when we got done with the conversation, he was like, "Man, this is the first time that I've ever met with someone for coffee, met with someone to talk, that I didn't talk about the gym the whole time." He's a big meathead kind of guy. He's like, that I didn't just talk about gym stuff the whole time. He's like, we talked about some important stuff. And that kind of made me feel like, okay, maybe I'm getting a little better, that I was at least able to drag the meathead out of the gym conversation.
Out of the gym for a little bit.
Which was funny. But like, people don't realize like how, conversation's everything. Like, I'm growing more and more aware of the fact that relationships, especially with all the stuff we're doing, like we just got back from LA, for the sole purpose of just building relationships with people and having conversations that would ultimately lead to connections and would lead to meaningful relationships that will create opportunities 10 years from now. Like, there's no like immediate ROI. Like, that wasn't even in the thought process, but they were all based around, hey, let's go out to LA and have some conversations. Like, that's literally was like the whole goal. Like, what are you doing out there? I'm just talking to some people. When we start realizing how important that hour-long conversation on Sunday morning with D. Murphy will end up being 5 years from now, then you start realizing the importance of being able to treat those windows of time with intentionality, which is what you obviously have figured out. So what does it look like for you now moving forward? You had the TEDx talk on Friday, but what's your day-to-day focus on getting this art of conversation out there and helping people with it?
Well, one, to keep working on myself, practicing it on me, right, and thinking well. The other piece is working with clients who get it and want it. I generally tell someone who calls this, hey, I'm interested in art of the conversation. Or, hey, I want to try art of the conversation. Oh, boy. Because it's in your face. It's practical. I generally say art of the conversation is not meant to be thought about. It's meant to be done. So you got to go do it before I can tell you if you're improving or not. Like, you actually have to go and do it and come back. If you want to have a philosophical conversation about communication and conversation, like, there's books about that. Yeah. Art of the conversation is meant to be used. So my desire is to help everyone. Right now, I'm working with companies who are making dents in their communities. Some national companies. I've got a meeting coming up with an international company, and what they're realizing, exactly what you're realizing, that in the world of technology and reactions, right, we've allowed reactions and responses to overtake listening and sharing. And now they're realizing our folks are amazing team members. They can do their job beyond a doubt, yet they can't talk to one another. They can't communicate. So right now, my desire with Art of the Conversation is to grow my client list intentionally. To say, are you ready to do this? So if a company's like, yeah, I think we're ready, I generally say, All right, let's get ready.
Yeah.
Let's do a survey, maybe a lunch and learn, because you need to be all in.
Yeah.
So, and it's not plug and play. I take the clients who hire me very seriously. So art of the conversation, it isn't something that if I did one for this company, I can just dial it back and then replug it over here.
Yeah.
Because I incorporate their culture. I incorporate their language. I incorporate what they value. Because that's the language that they're using. Remember, it's not a Lego set. It's not the same thing. So I also keep my client list pretty tight because I'm developing. So 80% of art of the conversation is the same. It's that 20% that makes it really unique for that company because I'm incorporating there. Yeah. So I want to grow it. I would love to continue to do it nationally. And then also, so we have, HR directors in companies and chief people officers in companies. The other piece is I want to train the trainers to train the trainers. Yeah. Like, I would love for companies to say, I want to do this, spend time with my guy or spend time with this woman and help us find the right person who's already in our company to help continue this on. Because there's only one of me. Yeah. So I can't replicate myself, but I can scale and I can teach and I can pass on knowledge. When I do trainings or give talks about art of the conversation, I generally say towards the end, I said, some of you are wondering if I'm this excited all the time and why I'm just going so hard, 100%, leaving it all on the floor. I said, because I could die on my way home.
It's true.
Like, you could be my last group of people I get to talk to you about the important, I get choked up and think, like the last group I may be talking about. Yeah. So if I was to die, I want you all to know what I think and believe, and so that you can go do it. So I can't just come in, dial it in, give it 80%. Can't, I got to go all in. So I want to grow it. I want to speak on it. I want to help people get better at it. This private gallery piece is massively important. And I'm not a coach. I'm not a counselor. But generally when you start talking about this private gallery, kind of pulling the veil back on that, people can do most of that work themselves. But then that may open the door for you to go talk with somebody or find a counselor or a group of friends. And you need that. Yep. So that's the big goal. Build it out.
You mentioned internationally. Random question. What have you seen any cultures or any other just countries, to get even more broad, that are really nailing the whole conversation piece? Like that distinctly that you can say, oh, definitely this culture, like they still get it. I say still get it because it seems like it's very traditional, like back to like Bible, like like conversation. That's how history passed.
Oral history.
Yeah. So, are there any countries or just cultures that, as a whole, do a good job with conversation?
So, I've traveled internationally minimally. So, this is a broad brushstroke of what I've noticed, and then the internet and watching the news and understanding some things. One of the things that separates some cultures. So, I spent some time in Berlin, Germany. One of the things that separates Berlin, Germany from, let's just say, Greenville, South Carolina, is the pace of life they keep, the margin of time they have. So they're very intentional to carve out time, just sit around and talk. Now, I don't speak German, so I don't know the quality of conversation. Sure. But there was this idea of more margin, more time, at least in the city of Berlin. But I would say, just based on what I observe, again, my perspective on it all, from what I see, the art of the conversation, the actual doing and the creation is beginning to decline globally. Yeah. We would rather picket and boycott. Is this about
to be an anti-social media
conversation? No. Well, this is what's fascinating about it. There's this part where I'm starting to do more on social media. I'm trying to, I think you said just post once a day for like a week and then twice a day. Like I'm just getting in there. And what I'm realizing is, people who respond to social media are still in the need the two greatest desires I think people have: the opportunity to communicate and respect to be heard. And for most people, social media is all they got. But for a lot of those people, they think that's as far as they can go.
That's interesting.
So it's where you need to start. Yeah. And if that's where you start engaging with somebody, if you're able to, and you're in the same town, and if there's something that needs to be talked about, then talk about it. Yeah. Direct message one another. Pick a time. Sit down. Meet face to face. Skype. Zoom. Whatever. FaceTime. Yeah. Get face to face. Look somebody in the eyes, and start talking about all the stuff that we're not talking about. I mean, it's today's Tuesday, right?
Today's Tuesday.
There was a boycott going on in downtown Greenville today. And there was probably 20 people holding up signs. It doesn't matter what the signs were about. The point is, 20 people holding up signs.
Sure.
Could those 20 people just go have a conversation with someone who disagrees with them?
Yeah.
And could you have a conversation with... You can have a conversation with someone who agrees with you, and that's fine. Mm-hmm. But more has happened when two people get in a room and talk than I've ever seen something written on a sign.
Yeah, that's very true.
So it's one of these things where other cultures... in their own way are declining from what I can tell. Mm-hmm. But it needs to improve in their cultures too.
Yeah. Man. So tell everybody, where can they find you online?
Okay.
Where do you want them to go to? And where can they find out more about the Art of the Conversation?
So Jonathan R. Parker on LinkedIn.
Okay.
I do quite a bit on LinkedIn, Art of the Conversation, or Jonathan R. Parker on LinkedIn. artoftheconversation@gmail.com. They can shoot me an email. In the process of starting a website.
Okay.
And the Facebook page is live. It's just Art of the Conversation.
Okay.
Beginning to start putting content out there in the next couple days. So yes, so LinkedIn, Jonathan R. Parker, artoftheconversation@gmail.com, and then Facebook, Art of the Conversation.
So before we close, what I want to do is give people one piece of advice in regards to conversation. It could be the most basic, like, first step, and it could be something as simple as like eye contact or something. But what's something tactically that we can give people coming out of this conversation to just start this process of becoming a better communicator?
Ask what and how questions rather than why questions. Why questions need to stay in the realm of philosophical. Why do you get up every day? Why does your company exist? Why do you believe the way you do? Like, why questions need to be reserved for philosophical conversations. Okay. But they are kryptonite. They are damaging. They are almost toxic to relationships, to relational conversations. So why questions are great philosophically. They are terribly relationally, because why questions put people on the defensive or the offensive.
That's what I was just thinking, yeah.
So if I asked you, why did you do that, Tyler? You're either going to fist up to defend, or you're going to go fist out to go on the offense, like, who are you?
Yeah.
But if I said, hey, Tyler, what led you to that decision? Now all of a sudden you get to share with me. You get to tell me a story. You get to have a conversation with me that's neither defensive or offensive. So if people just began relationally, and you would be shocked, just take inventory. How many times you ask somebody why? Relationally. Watch how your vocal art changes. Watch how your relationship changes when you just start swapping out why for what and how relationally. Just start there and watch your vocal art go to the next level. Watch your connectivity with people go to the next level. Watch relationships that you thought were almost beyond repair start being repaired. Because what you're doing with the what and how is you're inviting somebody into your narrative. You're inviting them to explain what's going on, to help you understand. So rather than, why are you late again? Which you're going to put them on the offense. You can say, hey, what's going on? You're late every Thursday. So just tell me what's going on in life. And all of a sudden you've given that person the permission, the freedom to tell you something.
That's so fascinating. I mean, just something that small, like, I never even thought about that. I mean, just now that I'm thinking about it, like, the word why, it just sounds confrontational.
Right.
It's just like, but it can be like something as simple as like, why are we going to this restaurant? Like, well, why wouldn't we go there? Like, what's wrong with the restaurant? It's like, that's interesting. Versus like, what restaurants did you look at?
Right.
And what led you to choose this one?
What stuck out on the menu that helped you choose this?
Actually, I like this, and that's why we're going there. That's so interesting. I never even thought about that. And I could think with like spouses, and that's probably I'm probably doing a lot of whys.
And if you're an employer, right, you got people underneath you, and you want to see those people go to the next level, don't ask them why questions. Because when you don't ask them why, they won't try to earn your trust, earn your favor. Like, they won't try to prescribe authenticity on you. They won't try to make it sound better than it is or worse than it probably was. Rather than why, if you're a CEO, COO, if you're over people, use what and how almost unquestionably all the time, and watch your team members just rise.
Have you read QBQ? Question behind the question?
No.
Is it right here? Is it up front right
QBQ?
here again?
If I can find it.
Absolutely love that book.
Question behind the question.
The summary of that book is that what's the phrase, TJ? It's the quality of your life will ultimately boil down to the quality of questions you ask yourself and others.
Yeah, the quality of your life is in direct proportion to the quality of your questions.
Yeah.
And it talks about that, though. Now that I think about it, it talks about not using the why and how, and using or maybe it is the how, but it's definitely not the why, but and it's definitely the what. There's two others that they interchange in there. But it's all about taking ownership and taking responsibility on everything. But yeah, it's called QBQ. It's another really, really good book. Well, man, I appreciate you being here for the second time.
This was awesome.
Here
Yes,
in the
thank you
studio,
so
in
much.
the office. We just told everybody where they can find you, but man, this is a conversation.
Conversation about a conversation.
This is a conversation that we need to definitely have more often. So maybe we can bring you in every month or so,
That'd
and
be
just
awesome.
kind of just
I
talk
would love
about
that.
some advances that you've had, because I have a feeling you're the type of person I can tell that's like, as this progresses and changes and evolves over time, it's just going to get better and better and better, and there's just going to be more and more information that I would believe that you're of the same mentality of mine, that giving this information out is the only way for it to really make an impact. And when you start talking about, I'm so impressed with the idea of talking to businesses, and you can transform a corporation, and if you can transform the corporation, you can transform the people within it.
Exactly.
Because if they're teaching that from the if they're teaching that from the top down, I mean that's important stuff. And that's in an employer or a business owner that's willing to invest in that type of training, knowing not only what it'll do for their business, but what it'll do for the individuals within it and their relationships and all that. I mean that's as far as it's almost like a wellness / productivity,
Right.
because it encompasses everything.
It does. Anytime. I'd love
So
to
if you're picking a topic to focus your life on, I would think conversation would be a really good one.
It's a good one. I hope so. I hope other people
Absolutely.
agree.
So, man, I've appreciated the conversation. Hope you guys that are watching have enjoyed this conversation on the art of conversation with Jonathan Parker. And until next time, we will see you then.
Thank you for listening to the BreadWinner Podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast and leave a rating on iTunes. For a chance to be on the show, send a screenshot of your iTunes rating to @TylerHarris page on Instagram, where he'll pick one person every single week. See you next time on the BreadWinner Podcast.